History doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler are two names that spark heated debate. One is remembered as a dictator who plunged the world into war, the other as a modern political figure whose influence still divides America. But why do we keep comparing them? Both rose to power, not in an instant, but gradually, step by step, speech by speech. Both railed supporters by pointing to outsiders, immigrants, minorities, marginalized groups, and blaming them for national problems often far beyond their control. Both fueled fear, anger, and resentment when promising strength, unity, and greatness. Mass deportation plans, immigration bans, rhetoric about undesirable groups. These aren't new ideas. They echo a much darker chapter of history. So in this video, we're going to take a look past the headlines and ask the tough questions. Are Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler really alike? Or are the comparisons exaggerated? Because if history is whispering warnings, it's up to us to listen. Ladies and gentlemen, let's dive deep into the synastry of Donald Trump, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, and Adolf Hitler, the brutal dictator that plunged the world into the most brutal war to date and is responsible for over 6 million deaths. Also, if you like this content, share and subscribe and like it. And if you want your own reading, you can go to www.nicholsastrology.com or see the description below. All right, before we get into the synastry of Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler, let me start off by saying I've never done this before. I've done one synastry reading, but the synastry reading is where you compare two birth charts and compare how they're going to interact with one another. However, Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler's life didn't overlap exactly. Hitler died on April 30th, 1945, and Trump was born June 14th, 1946. So, this is just kind of entertaining the idea that Donald Trump is the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler, and I have no proof of this. I'm just kind of speculating and spitballing and kind of seeing where this goes. So, this is just kind of for entertainment purposes only, if you wish. But let's start off with the individual birth chart of Adolf Hitler. You can watch the video up here. I've done that already with a guy named Ben, so you can go ahead and watch that if you want more information on Hitler and how he works. But he did have a Taurus sun over here in the 7th house, which is conjunct his Aries descendant and also his Mercury that is in the 6th house in Aries as well. So Hitler, the overarching theme of what Hitler needed to become was establish relationships in a very peaceful, calming, nurturing manner. He was a vegetarian and he had a high empathy for animals, and Taurus does kind of represent that energy. It does represent nature, but it is conjunct the descendant. So he did have a huge importance in forming relationships. But that descendant is in Aries, which would kind of include something that might have volatile relationships, maybe some domestic violence involved, maybe there's argument, maybe there's just impulsive, passionate sex, but it's kind of just something that's going off the seam of his pants rather than the sun who's kind of just slow and steady and kind of enjoys the peace. And like I said, it is conjunct Mercury, so he is made to be a public speaker. I think anytime they do say that in ancient times, I'm still kind of playing around with this myself, that there's this theory of a combustion, meaning any planet that is within degrees of the sun gets overpowered by the sun's rays and how strong it is, and it kind of decrepits that sun. But Hitler was known as an amazing speaker, so I don't always see truth to this. I mean, that's about a 10-degree orb, so I think that's pretty far apart. It is close to the descendant here. So he's made to have fiery speech and inspire people, which he was known for. He was a great public speaker, according to the sources. Of course, I heard the speeches, but I can't understand them because they're in German. But anyways, let's look at his Libra rising, which is 26 degrees Libra. And it's also making conjunction to Uranus, which is in Libra as well. So I'm finding this really interesting because my Libra sign is 25 degrees Libra, and Jeffrey Dahmer's is also a late Libra as well. all three of us have a Jupiter and Capricorn in a third house, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I just find that kind of disturbing and interesting at the same time. So again, we're comparing Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump, which is something that people do often, but we all have similarities with these crazy, dangerous people. But anyways, a Libra rising is someone who may be charming, diplomatic, just wants to find peace, and Venus is the ruling planet in his chart since it is in Libra. However, I never had that kind of effect on people being like this peaceful, diplomatic person who loves harmony and balancing things and doesn't like confrontation, but mine is conjunct Pluto as well. But making this conjunct Uranus, the Uranus is in the 12th house, so he's a bit of a rebel rouser. He is a revolutionary in his own way. I mean, you can't really argue that. He threw a revolution. Not all revolutions are necessarily good, but obviously Hitler's definitely wasn't. So this is kind of the path to the sun. So he has to have this Venusian things of aesthetics and pleasing sense. And it is in Taurus, like I said, making a conjunction to his Mars in the 7th house. So again, it's making that conjunction to Mars. So it's about turbulent relationships and hardships through growing that way. And it is retrograde as well, but Hitler was kind of, actually a lot of people deem him as attractive, and he has several mistresses. So that is kind of the theme of what he needs to go into this life, or his last life, I should say. We already talked about his Mercury a little bit. Let's talk about his Venus and his Mars a little bit more. They're both in Taurus in the 7th house. Venus is retrograde and Mars is not. It is direct. They are smack right on top of each other, 16 degrees. They're only divided by 19 arc minutes. So it's a very, very tight conjunction. So as I mentioned before, Hitler did have mistresses. He was very sexual. He had a lot of kinks and deviance in a lot of ways. There was also reports that he had one testicle that never fully descended. So maybe he had some weird sexual insecurities there. But it is in Taurus in the 7th house. You would think, again, oh, this is like a real nice, calm guy, but I think he may have been violent with women, and or maybe women been violent with him. I know he grew up in a situation where he was a kid and his dad was very abusive towards him, and probably his mom and everything like that as well. But let's talk about his moon. This is where things get really, really interesting for Hitler here. His moon is in Capricorn in the 3rd house. So long-term planning, speaking, communicating, building something that's going to outlast him was very favorable in Hitler's eyes. He wanted to leave this legacy behind. How it gets interesting, I would say, is we got the North Node up here in the 9th house in Cancer. So what rules Cancer? The moon. So we always take the North Node or the South Node and we look at its ruler, which is down here in the 3rd house, but we see what is the moon conjunct. Not only is it conjunct Jupiter in Capricorn in the 3rd house, but we also see that it's conjunct the South Node. So let's just step back and look at this for a minute. So before Hitler became a dictator, he was an artist. And art is very Cancerian. It's kind of what you do to kind of cope and express your emotions. But he painted very realistic buildings that are in foreign countries for the most part. So that's that 9th house theme there. So you need to go towards those artistic abilities, but when you strive for your North Node, you kind of go towards what the ruler is saying and where the ruler's at. And with the ruler down here, it's like a dog chasing his tail. So he strived for these unconscious urges to guide him to be an artist, but it just kind of circled back to his South Node. And we see his South Node is in Capricorn in the 3rd house, conjunct Jupiter, conjunct the moon. That would mean something along the lines of like he was a great speaker. He had this ability to enthrall audiences, but it's a dark negative bin since it is a South Node here. Having Jupiter in the right here making conjunction expands whatever it touches. So he could make these speeches that would kind of like slowly build up and slowly kind of manipulate people, I think. So these characteristics where he's using his moon, trying to go back to it, and he build these buildings, a very earth thing. Like he painted these buildings in different countries, as I said, with his North Node tendencies, but it goes back to his South Node and just like chasing his tail. over and over and over again. So he's never able to really progress. He just goes around in this circle. But enough on that. Look at Saturn here, which is the ruler of the South Node, by the way. And Saturn is in the 10th house in Leo. So he really has this urge to be public and have the public identity, and it'd be very harsh and crash, but he wants it centered around him since it's in Leo. Leo's about self-expression and aggrandizement. And Saturn is about this oppressive nature, oppressing things and limiting things and restricting things. And it is the ruler of his South Node. So he held these tendencies again. Like I said, he was chasing his tail with them. Moon down here conjunct the South Node when he's trying to strive up here for his North Node. But we go back here to the ruler. So he made himself a dictator. This is strong dictator energy right here, especially in Leo. He was the leader. He was in charge. He was up front. He was giving these speeches. He was performing in a very hard crash way. So that's how the world viewed Hitler, and that's how we still view him to this day. We talked about Uranus a little bit. Let's talk about a little more. It is retrograde in 12th house in Libra, conjunct his Libra ascendant. And it's making this opposition over here to Mercury, the descendant, and the sun. He needs to strive for peaceful, harmonious relationships, but yet his ascendant could get him there, but we see that Uranus is conjunct his ascendant. So this is going to make him very defiant towards people. Maybe he doesn't want his individuality taken away. I mean, he went to prison and he wrote Mein Kampf for trying to have a political coup that failed, only to get out. Again, this is shadows of Donald Trump, who has, 34 felonies and never saw a day inside of a prison cell. If I had 34 felonies, I would be in prison, I'm sure, and most of you would be too, right? So we got that double standard here, but this also indicates criminality. Again, he challenged people's beliefs. He changed people's beliefs. He took the Jews and made them the scapegoats, and eventually convinced Nazi Germany to it's okay to exterminate these people because they're bad and they're causing all this stuff. But this is where things are also very interesting for Hitler here. He has a Neptune Pluto conjunction in the 8th house in Gemini. So I know growing up, he had either a brother or a sister that had some sort of deformation or some retardation or something along the lines of that. And a big thing about Hitler was eugenics, and the 8th house does rule genetics and biology and things of that nature. We have the planet of death and the planet of illusions making conjunction in the house of death, in the house of genocide and things of that nature and killing people. And it's in Gemini, which relates to siblings. So growing up with a sibling that had this disability, maybe he thought that sibling was impure or unclean. So he had these visions, these dreams, these Neptunian themes of death and genocide and destruction. And that is making a quincunx over here to the moon, which is the ruler of his North Node. So again, it's just like chasing his tail. He couldn't figure out what he needed to do from what he needed to escape. It just kind of melded together. This quincunx is a 150-degree aspect where it's kind of this irritating thing that needs constant adjusting. It's just something that doesn't quite fit together and you try to force it, but you constantly have to do it. It's also making a sextile over here to the midheaven, which is also making a quincunx down here to the moon as well, forming a yod. So he wanted to bring these delusions of death and destruction and genocide out to his public life over here at the midheaven, which is also making a conjunction, a fairly loose conjunction, about 9 degrees to his Saturn in Leo, which is the ruler of his South Node, and is making his quincunxes there. So this energy is going very well. But again, I think there was some confusion where he needed to go in life because the North Node and the ruler are down here conjunct the South Node. He did. He killed 6 million Jews and other people in the Holocaust because that's what he thought he was destined to do. But secretly, it was not what he was supposed to do. I don't think. I think becoming an artist and not giving up so quick on that dream would have been more beneficial for Adolf Hitler. He only got rejected from like 2 schools and he threw his hands up in frustration, and yeah, the rest is unfortunately history. Enough with Hitler here. Let's go look at Donald Trump. You could also watch his video up here or down in the description as well. So let's look at the sun of Donald Trump in Gemini in the 10th house. Kind of a similar dynamic here. The sun is conjunct the North Node, which is also conjunct Uranus, which are all in Gemini in the 10th house as well. So the 10th house is about public reputation, how people see you as a whole and how you want to be seen in the world. And Gemini rules media and communication and intellect and things of that nature. And we got a sun here. He's a reality TV star. He's arguably the most famous or infamous person in the world, I guess, however you view him. But it's also the direction he needs to go. So that jives really well with that. So he basically turned the United States into a reality TV show. That's how things feel over here. It's quite ridiculous. And he has a lot of Uranian themes where he has to do things different. He has to usurp the common, what was traditional before, and make something his own and something new. He put his own thumbprint on what he did, and he's very chaotic. He's very unpredictable. So he implemented all these themes to that. Let's look at his moon. Again, more Hitler-esque themes here. His south node and his moon are making a conjunction in Sagittarius in the 4th house. So while the moon in this case isn't the ruler of his north node is in Gemini, so the ruler would be Mercury, which isn't far away. It's in the next house and the next sign, in Cancer in the 11th house. But his south node is in the moon, making conjunction to the moon in Sagittarius in the 4th house. And of course, naturally, it's making an opposition to all this stuff up here. So I have a south node Sagittarius as well, but mine's in the 2nd house. So this means that Donald Trump is kind of stuck in his ways and doesn't like to open up and accept other people's opinions. And he does this in the 4th house, so maybe he brings his public life into, or his private life into the public. He doesn't really hide anything. He just wants to be the center of attention. So, and the ruler of his south node is Jupiter, which is in the 2nd house, and it's stationary in Libra, making a conjunction to Chiron and Neptune, which we'll talk about a little bit more. That's very pivotal on Donald Trump. So he has his own philosophies in life. He has his own outlooks, and he is very hard to convince otherwise. Makes more sense, I guess, to explain all this stuff that's going on with his south node ruler in Jupiter in the 2nd house. So when a planet is stationary in a chart, that means it has extra strength, and whatever Jupiter, the planet of luck, prosperity, and expansion, touches, it expands and makes it grow. And it is in the 2nd house of wealth and value and how you value yourself, your self-esteem. So this is probably one of the reasons why he's so filthy rich, and also why he's a blatant narcissist. And again, if you want more details, go ahead and look at his birth chart in the description. Like, share, subscribe, and book your own reading while you're at it at nicholsastrology.com. So he also has these delusions because it is conjunct Neptune here. And that is a planet of delusions, illusionment, and dreams, and things that aren't really based in reality. So a lot of people who grow up rich, which he did, he had a silver spoon in his mouth from birth. He didn't earn this fortune. I guess he kind of did. I guess the story is he borrowed $1 million from his dad, and he turned that into his fortune today over many, many decades with his midheaven over here in Taurus. But like I said, it's also your confidence and how you view yourself, and he's a narcissist. So he has these delusions of grandeur, and they're going to be really, really big because it's conjunct Jupiter, which rules the south node down here, and it's going to make him happy because it's conjunct his moon. So that's your emotional state, what you need to make you feel safe and secure. So he makes these stories. The dude can't tell the truth to save his life. So he makes up these stories, these ideas, these delusions that he's the greatest thing on earth, and he is always right and he's never wrong. Like the tariffs and stuff, they're a horrible, terrible idea, and inflation's starting to rise back up, but I'm not going to get too far into that. But just giving you an idea of Donald Trump's character. If you haven't watched that video yet, I strongly urge you to do so. Let's look at his Leo rising, which is conjunct Mars over here, 29 degrees, another late born thing. And it's also conjunct Regulus, the fixed star. And it's also conjunct my sun, interestingly enough. So, like I said, I'm going to show the comparison of Hitler's synastry with Trump's, and there's some strange correlations, but we haven't got there yet. Anyways, a Leo rising is someone who is Leonian, really, who wants attention and who wants to be in front of the line and wants a spotlight on them, who wants to express themselves. And he has Mars there, so he probably has no problem doing that, even though the Mars is in the 12th house. But maybe he's propelling these delusions that's over here in the next house. Maybe he wants to be in charge of the world. He wants everybody to bow down and worship him, essentially. So he's going to be himself, or at least the mask he puts on. And he's going to do it with a lot of fervor and a lot of enthusiasm because Mars is conjunct there. But it is in the 12th house, which is ruled by Neptune and Pisces and all that thing. So maybe he has a higher self-esteem than he actually does, because deep down a narcissist really has low self-esteem and they pity themselves and they create this little world to make them where they're so great and they're so much better than everybody else, and everybody else has to love and admire them, which is what he is trying to do. He being the president is just a power play. Okay, we talked about his Jupiter. Let's talk about his Saturn. So it's an 11th house in Cancer, which is intercepted. I didn't really explain this very well in his birth chart video. But whenever you have the cusp of a house, you can see that the 11th house cusp is Gemini, 29 degrees, and it ends with Leo. So completely inside, swallowing up Cancer in the 11th house is what we got going on here. And anytime you have one intercepted sign, you got to go look at the other end. Again, you can see Sagittarius is 29 degrees at the cusp of the 5th house, and it ends 1 degree of Aquarius. So Capricorn is also intercepted. So these, what this means is these energies are really hard to display out into the world. They're more internal, and it's kind of like having a built-in square or a built-in quincunx where you want to express this energy, but you have a really hard time doing so. So we didn't even talk about his Venus yet, did we? So we got Venus and Saturn here making a conjunction, which in Capricorn or Cancer you think would be a little bit more easygoing and loving and emotional and things like that. But this intercepted house is kind of blocking that. He can't, and he's an ENTJ, so this is a very common ENTJ FI demon thing or FE demon thing where other people don't matter and other people don't express themselves, and if you hurt their feelings, too bad. They shouldn't have feelings. How dare they have feelings? Only I'm allowed to have feelings. So there's some kind of, I don't want to say inbuilt narcissism with being an ENTJ, but there is with INTJs as well, for the typology folks still watching. But the 11th house is about groups and future plans and hopes and aspirations and stuff like that. And he has Saturn making conjunction with that Venus. So he wants to control people. It's basically what that means. He doesn't do it in a very loving way because of the intercepted Cancer. So he wants to be in control of the groups. He wants to be in control of everything like that. And he wants to direct other people where to go and how they should respond. So he's a control freak. Let's talk about his Mercury here, which I said was the ruler of his North Node. And that is in Cancer in the intercepted sign of as well in the 11th house. So this would normally make you very soft-spoken and kind of loving and caring, where you have a lot of emotional intelligence, but Trump seems to lack that again because of the interception. It's also making a square down here to Chiron, which we should have brushed on too, because that is your wound and that's where you need to heal and mentor others. So it's in Libra down here in the 2nd house. So he maybe felt inferior to his peers, to everyone around. So he kind of just built this story where he's this grandiose narcissist and these delusions of grandeur, and he wants to express it out into the world, and he never healed that wound. I mean, he's almost 80. I don't think he's going to do it at this point. And it squares his speech. So he feels so bad about himself, and he makes these stories up that are complete lies and fabrications, and he makes wanting people to worship him because basically he's a cult leader, like the left is a cult, basically, essentially, as well. And that goes to Mercury, and that's how he speaks and presents himself to the world. Talked about Uranus a bit, which is making that conjunction over here to the North Node and Moon. That is where you're defiant. That is where you go against the grain and go against society and go against social norms. And it is in the 10th house. So he is this reality TV movie star and he took the White House and made it a joke, and he made the United States a joke. It is just for people to love and admire him. He likes to make people mad. Essentially, what this means, and that is his goal in life. He needs to change things. And we are in amongst some of the biggest changes in humanity right now. It's not very pleasant to live through, but this is definitely going down in the history books over generations to come. He also, I think this would indicate he gets fueled by people that rebel against him. Like he likes making people go out with and protest him at parks and stuff like that and picket him and say no kings and this and that. He feeds off that attention. That's one reason why I don't participate in it. One, they're left and they're a little nutty themselves, I think. I think the extreme right and extreme left definitely need to check themselves and need to like think for themselves. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I can get along with Trump supporters. I can get along with people on the left, but I'm not supporting either side. I'm kind of neutral. That attention that he gets, that rebellion against him only fuels him. So you're not really helping the matter. You're only hurting it. And it's making this trine over here to Jupiter, again, that grandiosity. And his fortune propels his public life because he's a billionaire and he can afford to pretty much do whatever he wants, and apparently to get out of 34 felonies and not spend the day in jail. Talked about his Neptune a bit. Let's talk about his Pluto, which is over here in the 12th house in Leo, indicating that he's a boomer. The boomer generation, the generation before, the silent generation, the Pluto and Cancer, they took the brunt of World War II. So they got all the prosperity and all the luck, basically. They got the $20,000 houses that you could buy brand new. They got the $4,000 cars that you can buy. The husband was able to go to work one job, not two or three, or work a bunch of overtime like we have to these days, and able to support his wife, who can stay home and take care of the housework and take care of the kids. And they have this suburban leave it to beaver sort of life, and they're able to save up for retirement and all these luxuries that we just don't have, or many of us don't have. I know I don't. But again, it's this dark element of death and transformation and personal psychology, and it isn't the house of troubles. So again, he probably has these deep rooted mental illness that are very, very deep. Pluto and the 12th house are very hidden and subconscious, and they're not really out into the forefront showing its face. And it looks like Pluto is unaspected here. That's interesting as well. But again, these delusions of grandeur, maybe he has these dark thoughts of power because Pluto is about power, and this is kind of about the group cohesion, the everybody, society. Let's all get along, but he wants power and domination over everyone. Okay. Now, let's look into the synastry. So I got several charts here. This is the bi-wheel of Hitler's chart, which is the inner wheel. The outside wheel is Donald Trump. So all these planets out here. So basically, they're laying one on top of each other to kind of see how they're compatible. So the cusp right here of the first house is Hitler's ascendant. So we're just going to kind of go through and see what planets they have that Donald Trump has in Hitler's houses. So right here, you can see that he has his IC, his South Node and Moon in Trump's second house. So the first house is empty, so there's nothing there. But we see that the second house has the South Node and Moon. So maybe Hitler possibly, again, this is pure speculation. I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas. I don't know if anybody's ever done this before. This is really just like compatibility, how you're going to get along romantically, sexually, parentally, neighborly, business, whatever. This really isn't designed to compare two people that lives didn't even overlap. But again, like I said, Hitler died supposedly, depending on what you believe, right before Trump was born, within a year or just a little over a year. So I find that interesting. Well, we talked about Hitler's second house, which is his self-worth, his values, money, resources, things like that. And Hitler's or Trump's moon and his south node are here. So we talked about his strong belief systems about himself because Jupiter, which is in Hitler's 12th house, was in Trump's second house. So maybe this carried over because Hitler also had an abundance of self-esteem, it looked like, as well, because he became a dictator and didn't think twice about killing 6 million people and almost taking over Europe. So maybe this is something that carried over because the South Node is, again, about past lives and karma and things of that nature. And they both have the moon conjunct the South Node, which is really interesting as well. And it's opposed my moon too. That's really interesting. His moon is exactly opposed my Gemini moon over here, and his sun is conjunct my moon. Very strange. So, like I said, like Hitler's chart and Trump's chart line up, it doesn't mean anything, but I'm just kind of seeing what happens. But anyways, there may be some pests. Maybe Hitler died and he carried that self-esteem over to Trump, and that kind of led to him needing to get over the narcissism in his life. But he's almost 80 and he is full blown. So the third house is empty. Let's look at the fourth house where Trump's descendant lies in Hitler's fourth house. So Trump has an Aquarius descendant, so he likes the people that are exotic and strange. Like his wife is from some Slavic country. I forgot where, Ivanka or Milena. I can't keep up with them. I don't know which one's his wife, but sounds like he was diddling his daughter too, like P. Diddy. But this is what make Trump feel comfortable in Hitler's presence, I guess you could say, because this is Hitler's fourth house. This is the house of your safety and your private life and what you're behind like closed doors with the people that you're closest, the most intimate to, and your emotional state. So if that isn't the reincarnation of Hitler, Trump is. So he's looking down from wherever he's at, or up, I should say, maybe. And he really admires and he maybe feels safe and comfortable in Trump's presence if they were alive today. Fifth house, empty. Sixth house, it does have, that's empty as well. Seventh house is empty. Eighth house has Trump's midheaven, his north node, sun, and Uranus and Gemini as well. So again, the eighth house of Hitler is about death and transformation, about shedding old habits and old psychological burdens, working through them and coming out something new and coming out something stronger. It's also about shared resources and taxes and things like that. So Trump's north node, Uranus, and sun is here. So maybe there had been some shared intimacy or something along the lines of that. Maybe they had a similar mission of death and destruction, because Hitler did have that very problematic Uranus Neptune conjunction in the eighth house about the genocide and the eugenics and things like that. They both have similar ways that they're coming into power, even though Trump or Hitler had a huge head start. He did it in his 30s, I think, and Trump is pushing 80. But their stories unfold. If anything, I think Trump is borrowing from Hitler how he rose to power against with the immigration. Hitler blamed the Jews, Trump blames the Mexicans, essentially. So we got these two extremes. We got the two extremes here. We got the left that let all the immigrants in and they ran amok and they were dwindling resources and causing all this crime. Trump comes in and deports everybody, possibly even like the good ones and stuff like that. Because I worked at an ICE detention center, and I said this in a Trump video: if you want to cancel me, whatever, I don't care. This is before it all came to the limelight, and I was just doing a job. The ICE detention center I did work at, and I didn't work for ICE, I was contracted to work through ICE, was a place where there were a lot of felons. So like 90-85% of the people there were immigrants, and they committed felonies. They served their time. Now they're at a detention center and either fighting their case or awaiting deportation. But there's also a lot of good, hardworking immigrants that come to this country and just want what's best for them and their families. And they work jobs like you and I, and they support the system. They often work jobs that Americans don't want to work. They work in the farm fields. I know down in Yuma, Arizona, I've been down there before, and they would transport immigrants from across the Mexican border, since it's basically a border town, to go work in a 120-degree desert picking lettuce and things like that. So they do a lot of good things, but there's also bad ones. One side is letting everybody in without checking and vetting everybody, and Trump is trying to deport everybody out. Again, the answer is in the middle somewhere. In the ninth house, we got Trump's ruler of his north node, which is Mercury, and we also got that Venus Saturn conjunction. And this is a house of long distance travels, along of morality, of beliefs, of things of that nature. So he wants to control people. Maybe he maybe he did some research and some higher learning. That's what the ninth house does represent from Hitler. And he took a page out of his book on how to manipulate and how to control people, because that Venus Saturn conjunction there is pretty damning of that. It is in Hitler's or Trump's intercepted sign of Cancer, and his Mercury is there too, which is normally someone who would have high emotional intelligence, but again, isn't expressing it because of the intercepted sign. But maybe he learned a lot from Hitler. I know Hitler learned a lot from American history about slavery and stuff like that, and that's essentially what he did to the Jews. In Hitler's 10th house, we have Trump's Pluto, Mars, and ascendant conjunction. So with Pluto there in Hitler's 10th house, so maybe this is like, again, the reincarnation of him. It is conjunct his Saturn, which is the Lord of Karma, which indicates past life stuff as well, and things that you bring in this world that you need to overcome and work hard and diligently towards, and is conjunct Pluto's in Trump's house. So maybe he brought that power, those themes of death and destruction. He was a dictator because he had it in the 10th house, which he rules with an iron fist. And that is conjuncting Trump's dark thoughts that he keeps to himself in the 12th house. So he wants to be like Hitler, it sounds like. I know when he looks at Putin, he has these doughy eyes and his smile. Guy hardly ever smiles. I don't either, so I'm not judging him for that. But when he's around Vladimir Putin, who is a dictator, more or less, he just lights up, and you can see the respect and admiration in Trump's face, and it's kind of sickening. We also have his ascendant, Trump's ascendant, and his Mars conjunction up there. So this is how he's going to take action and present himself to the world. And he's doing it in a very Hitler fashion, interestingly enough, and he's doing it very publicly like Hitler did. So again, maybe he read Mein Kampf, maybe he studied Hitler's work and his rise to power and what he did, and maybe he's trying to emulate that. Again, this is speculation, just spitballing, but it's interesting nonetheless. In Hitler's 12th house, we have that Neptune, Chiron, and Jupiter conjunction, and Jupiter ruled Trump's south node. Again, the vast wealth and the death and expansion. And look at that. What is conjunct Jupiter there? Uranus. So Hitler's crazy ideas, how he wanted to rebel and he wanted to be this brutal dictator, is in the thoughts and in delusions and in the goals, because Jupiter rules empires and things and dictators and countries and things like that. So that recklessness that Hitler had, and Trump has it too, because conjunct his north node, is possibly coming from Hitler's old tyrannical ideas that he had as being a dictator and being this criminal and this iconoclast, and it's coming up in Trump's delusions. Okay, now we're going to look at how Hitler's planets interact with Trump's. So just to explain again, I switched it around. Trump's is the inner wheel now, so this is going to be Trump planets. All these inside the circle, all these planets and his houses are going to be what Trump has, and the outside is going to be Hitler. So nothing in the first house. In the second house, we find Hitler's Uranus. So again, we already talked about a minute ago, like the delusions of grandeur and the fortune and how he can propel that. And his wound is making a conjunction to the Uranus there. Hitler's rebel rousing, and it's also with the ascendant, but the ascendant goes in the third house, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So Hitler presented himself in the world as a rebel, and Trump admired this because of Jupiter conjunction here with the South Node ruler. Again, is the ruler of the South Node, where we're coming from past lives. So he wanted to take these radical ideas and bring them into this world, and he incorporated into his delusions. Who knows? Maybe he thinks he is the second coming of Hitler. Don't know what goes on in that Pluto 12th house thoughts of his about these grandeurs and being in the spotlight of Leo. And his ascendant is in the third house, so this is how Hitler presented himself superficially to the world, his path to his son. And he looked at Hitler's path and his rise to power, and he took note of it, and he's implementing it and communicating it to the world. Trump's fourth house is empty where Hitler's stuff is, but the fifth house isn't. We got that notorious moon Jupiter south node conjunction that we spoke about. So the north node ruler is the moon, but it's making that conjunction to the south node. And this is what brings him joy. And this is his creativity and how he expresses himself to others. And it is in that Capricorn interception there. So this is also about romance and flings and things like that. And we have an idea of with the Epstein files, and he's talking about all the things coming out about his daughter and all the abuse there. So maybe he has these dark thoughts about kids and dark thoughts about romance and overpowering and controlling women. But Trump didn't come out very well because Capricorn is intercepted there. But Hitler's idea of domination, power, and control, maybe that's something that he keeps hidden as well. And that's what he wants to express into the world. He wants to be the strong man like Hitler and Putin are. Hitler's IC in Aquarius, which is Trump's descendant, is in the sixth house of Trump. So the day-to-day routines of Trump, daily health habits and things like that, and working and stuff like that, and schedules. He sees that Hitler's IC was down there in Aquarius. So maybe he wanted to make his day-to-day thing. Seventh house, eighth house, empty. Huge loaded ninth house. So Hitler has a ton of planets in Trump's ninth house. We got the sun, we got Mars, we got Venus that are in Taurus, and we also got the descendant and Mercury there. So this was Hitler's need to have these harmonizing relationships with nature and other people and stuff like that. But there was a lot of disgruntlement and hard relationships and one-on-one interactions was in Aries, and it was fiery and passionate. This is also Hitler's speech abilities, the Mercury there conjunct the sun and the descendant, so he captivates other people. And he also has that that Venus-Mars conjunction here as well. So again, a very deep need for relationships and romance and love and things like that and harmony, but that Mars there is like domestic violence in a can, I guess, in a way. Doesn't necessarily mean that. It also means weird sexual kinks and confusion and things of that nature. But the ninth house is about study and higher education and learning and dogmas and philosophies and things of that nature. So this is where Hitler's speaking abilities and his essences, and maybe, again, Trump studied this and took a page from his book. Hitler's Pluto Neptune conjunction about the delusions and fantasies of death and genocide and eugenics are in Trump's 10th house. So these delusions of genocide and power and eugenics and stuff are in Trump's 10th house. So again, maybe he wants, again, it's a speculation that he wants to bring forth and be publicly known for death and destruction and hate. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Now, in Trump's 11th house, we see the North Node and Chiron conjunction there. So Hitler had this wound that needed healing of emotions and expressing himself in a very sensitive, kind of feminine nature. And that is in Trump's 11th house, which interestingly enough is his intercepted Cancer house, where he has that need to control with that Venus-Saturn conjunction and his Mercury, very soft-spoken feminine side of him. So he kind of has Hitler's wound in this intercepted Cancer house, and it's conjunct Mercury, which is Trump's North Node ruler. So maybe he carried on this wound of not being loved and nurtured into this life, and that's how he expresses it. That intercepted house keeps him from expressing his love and his nurturance and being very emotional and having high emotional intelligence and caring and being endearing towards others. Lastly, we got Hitler's midheaven and Saturn in the 12th house, and that Saturn is again making that conjunction to Pluto and Trump's dark hidden side of his psyche. So maybe I'm showing indication that maybe Trump did in fact study Hitler and his rise to power, and he's trying to mimic that, and how Hitler ruled with that iron fist over there with that Saturn in the 10th house he has those fantasies and that dark thoughts of the 12th house, and he wants power. He wants that power, but he can't quite bring it out, it seems like. I think the United States did a good job of keeping and preventing dictators from rising to power, even though it's not foolproof. A lot of presidents over the years, from George W. Bush on up, slowly and surely gave power to the presidents where they can pretty much do whatever they want. And now we're paying for that. And we're going to look at some of the inner aspects of Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler. Basically, how Trump's placements and planets interact with Hitler. This is a synastry grid of how Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler's planets are going to interact by aspect. When they're in synastry, it's called an inner aspect. The first one we're going to look at, we talked about a bit already, so it's not a surprise there. So keep in mind that Hitler is up here on top, going that way, and Donald Trump's planets are going down. So there is the Pluto conjunct Saturn. So we can find out here, we'll look for Pluto and we'll meet Saturn. No, wait, Pluto, Saturn, there's that conjunction there. So Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma. We already talked about this. I don't go over too much, but and that is Trump's deep, dark fascinations of power. So maybe carrying that past life power, because Hitler actually did have that power. He actually was a dictator. He actually almost took over Europe and exterminated the whole religion and race of people. And I think Trump gets boners thinking about that pretty much. So we got Trump's north node here, and that makes a trine over to his sextile. And by default, his south node will sextile Uranus. Or I should say the north node trines Hitler's Uranus. Trump's south node sextiles Hitler's Uranus. So the nodes are, especially the south node, are based on past life. And this was Hitler's being the usurper who rose to power, who had a political coup and went to prison, wrote Mein Kampf and came out guns a-blazing and actually succeeded this time. And it's tied into what Trump is coming from and where he needs to go. So maybe there, at least there was some very admiration of Hitler's tenacity and things of like that. So this is very tied into kind of where he needs to go and where he's coming from. Trump is very Uranian himself. He presents himself as this mega star, which he unfortunately is, and he just pisses people off to get a rise and get attention. That's all it really is. So hopefully it doesn't come to anything darker than this, but we already talked about Hitler's Uranus there, so don't want to beat a horse to death any more than I need to. So Donald Trump's ascendant trines all these things here. That is Hitler's moon, Hitler's sun, and Hitler's Mercury. That is very strong. It is a loose trine between the sun and the ascendant, but still it's there. So this is how Trump is supposed to present himself to the world and kind of complete his task and reach his Gemini sun, and it's Leo. But it's also, he looks at the things that made, they both have the conjunction of the moon conjunct the south node. They have that in common, which is very interesting. This is what makes them happy. This is what makes them feel fulfilled and safe and loved and honored and stuff like that. So they get their rocks off by very strange things. So they both get fascinations with power and dominance and control. They get happy of how they are intrinsically, of how narcissistic and how evil they can be. And it's trining all of Hitler's big planets here. How he speaks, his public speaks. He probably had his speeches translated or whatever and read them, took note of them, watched how Hitler looked, the micro expressions that he used, the hand gestures that he used, seen how Hitler expressed himself and really admired that. And it has this flowing aspect to it. Also, Hitler's essence as a whole, because it is trying his son and his emotional fulfillment of being cruel. Trump's taking pages out of Hitler's book and maybe applying that to his own path. Presumably. There's a lot more that we could talk to. Again, I'm just experimenting. So Donald Trump and Hitler have very big parallels. Again, this is just shooting from the hip and kind of seeing what comes of it. This is not the purpose. I'm sure I have plenty of stuff that ring bells with Donald Trump and Hitler. So this is just speculation. This is just to see if they really are alike. And yes, I think at very least you could say that Donald Trump and Hitler are very much alike in a lot of ways, but they're also different. If you like this content, like, share, subscribe. If you want to see more synastry videos, let me know down in the comments below, or you have anything in common with Hitler and Trump yourself. I know that's tough to say, but I have stuff in common, especially with Hitler. That's a little scary, but who knows? Share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and have a good day. Thank you for watching.